Yo, what's up? This is Eldritch Terror. Today we're going to be talking about Halloween Horror Nights 2024 on both coasts. We're going to be talking about rumors, speculation, and finally announcements. We're also going to be going over Universal's epic dark universe finally being announced and all of the things that they revealed with that. I've also sourced some information from around the web that I think that you guys will be interested in, including when frequent fear passes and multi-day tickets might be announced. Speculation season here is almost coming to a close, and while that means we'll be getting all of the answers to the questions we've had year-round, it also means it's the last chance for us to juice a little bit of fun out of this scavenger hunt to figure out what might be coming this year. And I think we've got it pretty nailed down to what it's going to be. So with so much to discuss today, let's just get right into it. Starting off with Universal Orlando, looking at the Horror Night Nightmares Speculation Map 3.5 that they just put out. We're going to be starting from the logo and working clockwise around the map, and talking about the things that we both have and haven't covered so far on this channel. So first we got Monstros, the monsters of Latin America. This is Orlando's version of a house that Hollywood had last year, and it promises that you'll be chased by some terrifying legends of Latin American folklore as you brave your way through this house. The monsters here will include a shape-shifting vampire turkey vulture, an owl witch that seeks to feast on babies, a giant whistling stalker, and a gravedigger from the Cemetery of the Lost. This house is guaranteed to be an intense one. I'm really excited for it. If you're looking for spoilers here and you want a real clear idea of what it's going to be like, be sure to go check out the videos that people have posted from last year's haunt back in Hollywood. It won't be a one-for-one, definitely not, because when Orlando and Hollywood share the same IPs and stuff like that, they'd never do the same exact thing. I'm really excited to see Orlando's take on this, and I have a strong feeling that at the end of the event we're going to be saying that this is one of the scarier houses. And for the first of our IP houses this year, we have A Quiet Place. This house is going to be based on the first and second movie, and will walk guests through terrifying scenes of a post-apocalyptic world where monstrous creatures hunt down anybody who dares to make a sound. Don't worry though, I've heard that this house will be anything but quiet. Us guests will be screaming our heads off as we walk through this thing, guaranteed. The set design and the puppets and costumes for these monsters is going to absolutely blow our minds, man. I promise you that. Some people are not really excited for this, and I can kind of get it. I mean, A Quiet Place isn't everybody's like favorite horror franchise of all time or anything like that, but I really think that we need to go into this one with an open mind, because they can do some very cool things inside of this house. If they play their cards right, this could be very, very cool. In Soundstage 23B, we have a bit of speculation that's been all but guaranteed at this point. This is going to be Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. Now, I get it. Frozen Empire is not exactly the most mind-bendingly shocking, horror, twisted, demented type of thing that we are really wanting here at Horror Nights. But Ghostbusters is a franchise that goes back with Universal as far as its beginning. It's engraved in the roots of the theme park, and I mean, it'll be a cool thing to have at the event. Every time Universal does like a frozen house, something that's cold and covered in ice, they always do such a good job and make me feel like I'm transported to another place. Definitely doesn't feel like I'm in Orlando when I'm in those houses. So we'll see what they can whip up and what they got to offer us. Next up in Soundstage 24A, we have this little lantern icon that most people are speculating has gotta be Insidious. With the new movie that just came out, this is one that people are gonna be very excited to see. Insidious is a franchise that we've seen at Horror Nights before, and it's one that a lot of people hold near and dear to their hearts. With Blumhouse in Universal's back pocket at all times, I think it's safe to say that that's a pretty good guess, and that we probably have an announcement for this guy coming pretty soon. And next we have the most controversial announcement that I've seen so far this season, the Triplets of Terror. In what can only be described as the Gore House for this year, you're invited to the Barmy's Triplets birthday bash, but be aware, they celebrate by recreating their family's murders. Prepare for a gory gathering. Was this originally supposed to be a stranger's house? I don't know. Was this originally going to be Five Nights at Freddy's? Maybe. But what I do know is that we're getting 3 weird-looking killers in a house that's going to be covered in blood. These guys killed their parents, and we're going to see exactly how they did it. I am pretty excited for this one, mainly because of the controversy and just the fact that we all really have no idea what we're going to be seeing in here. It's widespread speculation that this is them taking advantage of a set that was already built for something else. But I don't know, maybe this was their intention the whole time. We'll have to see about that. In the Fast and Furious building, we got Major Sweets Candy Factory, and man, this might be my most anticipated for this year. If it's not the one I'm most excited for, it's got to be a close second to one we'll talk about later. But Major Sweets Candy Factory is a full house version of a scare zone that we had recently. At Horror Nights 31, we had a scare zone that was supposed to be a Halloween night parade gone horribly wrong. The Major Sweets Candy Factory produces all kinds of candy for kids to fill up their pails on Halloween night, but they're putting something crazy in that candy because these kids all freak out and murder everyone on the streets. This house plans to take us to the factory where that candy was made, in a Halloween 3 reminiscent type house. That's sure to be a fun one this year. The internet's been calling this one a trip through an evil Willy Wonka chocolate factory, and to me it really does give big Halloween 3 vibes. Pretty sure this is my number 2 most anticipated house of the year. It's gotta come second to another one that we're about to talk about. This is definitely one of my most anticipated for this year, hands down. In the back of the park, we're greeted by Goblin's Feast. Goblin's Feast will take us through a tavern and village that's full of goblins, orcs, hobgoblins, and witches that are just waiting to pick and pull us out of line to cook us up and serve us as the main course. I think that this house is going to be really cool. It's kind of another weird one as far as theming goes, but the way they did the Dueling Dragons last year was so badass. I love to see dark fantasy come into Horror Nights. There's a lot of opportunities for really cool set pieces and costumes in this one, and I just want to see the team go hammer time on that and just make some really twisted versions of these fantasy creatures. Our house for T4 hasn't been announced yet, but it's all but guaranteed this is our Universal Monsters house for this year, and that it's going to be based on the theming of Scream Queens. Universal Monsters Silver Scream Queens was a scare zone featured at Halloween Horror Nights 2021 in Hollywood. This house featured the She-Wolf of London, Dracula's daughters, the Bride of Frankenstein, Frankenstein's monster, and more. The Bride of Frankenstein brought classic female movie monsters back from the grave to strike fear into the hearts of men. This scare zone was really cool, and I'm really excited to see them do this in a full-fledged house. I think that this is going to be very reminiscent of the Bride of Frankenstein versus the Brides of Dracula that we had a few years ago, and the Universal Monsters houses are always in my top 5 every year. They're always so beautiful. They could call this house whatever they want. As long as it's a Universal Monsters house, I know that it's going to be awesome. And I can't wait to talk about more Universal Monsters news later in this video. Stay tuned for that. Next up in T2, we have Slaughter Cinema 2. This house is a direct sequel to a house that we had a few years back, and it'll take us to a drive-in movie theater where a bunch of discarded B movies are playing all night long. We'll be walking through room after room that'll be dedicated to its own individual horror movie, chocked full of all kinds of cheesy B-movie horror stuff that we'll love. We've been teased already a little bit by showing this scare actor and telling us that he'll be featured in a room called Heavy Metal Hell 3D. But other than that, we don't know too much about what to expect from this, in terms of what the rooms will be based on. The previous Slaughter Cinema featured Amazon Cannibals from Planet Hell, Cult of the Beast Baby, Pumpkin Guts, Barber Chop, Schitzel's Kids, Curse of the Swamp Yeti, Sorority Sacrifice, and Midnight Snack 2. This is absolutely my most anticipated house of this year. It's this one. It's gotta be this one. The first Slaughter Cinema was my favorite house of that year. The concept and idea is so cool, and I personally love cheesy B movies, so this is right up my alley. I cannot wait to smell the popcorn as I'm walking into this house, man. And our final house on this list is the Museum Deadly Exhibits. The house's description reads that you decide to visit the new folklore museum exhibit, the Rotting Stone, when an evil escapes from within, destroying everything in its path. Not too much is known about this house or what it's going to contain, but from its vague nature and all of the things that they could do with it, I'm really excited to see what they got under wraps here. I can't exactly explain why, but for some reason it's giving me Graveyard Games kind of vibes, and I'm so intrigued by what exactly this museum could be. Is it a murder museum? Is it maybe a museum of torture techniques or something like that? From this Rotting Stone exhibit thing, it kind of makes me think that it might be a Rock and Roll Hall of Fame kind of deal. And with a lot of the advertisement that they've been having this year being kind of punk rock kind of related, that wouldn't really surprise me too much. But I don't know, that could be a reference to the Heavy Metal Hell 3D thing too. I'm not exactly sure. We'll see. But spinning this map back around one more time and going over scare zones and shows, we're going to be starting off with our entry port scare zone and working clockwise again. Nothing is really known about this one, but every year the first scare zone that we have normally kind of showcases everything else that we're going to see in the event to come. So I expect something of that nature. However, this icon right here does look a little bit familiar. Perhaps the theming that we've been seeing in the trailers lately, with all this crazy bio-organic gory stuff going on, could be featured here in this front scare zone. I also gotta mention that this gate guy here was given a name, so let's hope that we can get a real-life Otis to greet us as we're entering. That would be so cool. Next up, we have this skull wearing a little biker helmet, and it's hard to see here, but this is actually a dragon depicted on the emblem on the top. Theories that I've heard include another vampire type scare zone, or maybe a Devil Dogs kind of thing, making reference to the original Slaughter Cinema, though it'd be strange to have it featured all the way over here. I'm not exactly sure what this one's going to be, but it does look very interesting. I have a feeling that this one's going to be a totally new concept, and one that we'll probably come to love. The New York scare zones always just hit. It feels like they save the best ones for real. Next up, up, we have this little teddy bear guy with these building blocks. This hasn't been confirmed yet, but due to the fact that we're seeing Monstros coming this year, it's safe speculation to assume that this is probably Orlando's version of the Toys Scare Zone that Hollywood had last year, which for them was actually a return of it from 2012. The lore here tells of a toy maker that delighted the children of London with his handmade teddy bears and dolls. But as times changed and the toys went out of fashion, they were faced with ruin. The toy maker snapped and decided to take his revenge out on the people who turned their backs on him. Using his skills, he began to serve a darker calling. Now anyone who ventured too close to the toy shop at night was in danger of being abducted by the evil toy maker and turned into one of the monstrous new creations, human toys. Now these devilish dolls are after you and your friends. Characters featured in these scare zones included the Bad Bunny, Sailor Walker, Dolly Molly, Baby Dead Alive, Ballerina Screamer, Evil Toy Soldiers, the Evil Toy Maker, a Raggedy Ann, a Jester, and of course a teddy bear. Though this may sound like a childish theme for a scare zone, I promise you this is going to be anything but. If you look back at what Hollywood's done with these guys, it's been pretty cool. And I know that Orlando is going to nail this. It's going to be twisted. Next on our map, we see that we'll be having a return of the Death Eaters, and following that up, we have the return of Nightmare Fuel. The Nightmare Fuel shows are an absolute spectacle. If you've been living under a rock long enough to not have seen these guys when you come to the event, if you don't delegate a little bit of your time to check the show out, then you are missing out on a huge part of the vibe. Next up, we have this little sombrero icon, and not much is known about what this could be, but it's surefire that this is probably some kind of a Latin American scare zone. Next up, we have this little bow icon that seems to mark a show, and it's widely speculated that this show is going to be the return of Megan's. And if you think it's weird that they're recycling things from last year, it's very possibly because this next scare zone is speculated to become a straight up Blumhouse scare zone that'll feature characters from all of our favorite Blumhouse movies, and of course that would include Megan. So if they did bring this back for a round 2, it's probably not going to be in the exact same fashion as we saw it last year, but this time probably more so just featured as a part of that scare zone, and a show there likewise. But enough about Orlando, right? They get all the announcements and stuff over there. Let's talk about Hollywood. Well, you're in luck because there's some stuff to talk about there too. Starting with the Horror Nights logo and working clockwise around the map once again, we see a quiet place in the OOB venue, and moving up to the next building, we have an icon for a new South American haunt. This one will probably be a continuation of Monstros and contain new monsters that weren't previously featured in the house. This is a very exciting one, though I'm pretty sure we know what to expect here. Next up, we have some glasses with some lights in the eyes, and it doesn't take Sherlock Holmes to figure out that this is probably The Weeknd. If you're unfamiliar with the work that The Weeknd has done with Horror Nights so far, it's time to get up to date with that. I personally am not a fan of his music, it's just not my genre, but I can easily admit that this house was awesome. Though bathed in strobe lights, they managed to recreate scenes from all of his music videos. And every year I try to bring some friends with me down to Horror Nights, and it made it a lot easier to convince them when they saw this on the bill. The album playing in line never really gets old, and it'll be really cool to see what they do here. In Soundstage 15, we have the Universal Monsters Scream Queens returning to the event, this time as a house. And in the T-Pad building, we've got this pig mask with a chainsaw. This guy right here is up for speculation, but I've seen some reports online that this is definitely going to be Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Love it or hate it, Texas Chainsaw Massacre is a staple in the horror franchise, and it's always cool to see staples like that come to events like this. It's not exactly known if this is going to be based off a specific movie or if this is going to be kind of like what Orlando did recently and just kind of throw a bunch of characters from the original few into a house. But if Leatherface makes an appearance, it's surefire that this is going to be sick. Moving into the Mummy building, we see Dead Exposure Death Valley. Dead Exposure Death Valley is an all-new original house, loosely based on a concept that we've seen previously in Orlando. The Dead Exposure house there took us through a zombie apocalypse as our way was guided by strobing lights meant to emulate photographs being taken, almost as if they were documenting the whole thing. This house was extremely disorienting and very gory, but the description for Death Valley states that we'll enter a top-secret government facility where an experiment to create super soldiers has gone horribly wrong, turning people into radioactive zombies, and they escape just as you arrive. I'm so excited to see this radioactive take on zombies here. This is gonna be a cool one. For this year's Terror Tram, it seems that we're getting a Blumhouse takeover of the whole thing. There's so many cool things that they could do with this, and I'm sure that we'll be seeing similar IPs appearing here as we do in the speculated scare zone for Orlando. In H-Lot 2, it appears that we're gonna get Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, and in H-Lot 1, we're probably getting an Insidious house. Scare zones this year feature a Skull and Crossbones, speculated to be either a graveyard scare zone or perhaps a pirate cemetery. This punk rock skull guy that could be on the same vibe as the Heavy Metal Hell 3D section of the Slaughter Cinema 2 house, and this little luchador mask here. This one is for some kind of a lucha monster scare zone, and we actually know exactly what's going to be featured here because I found some photos online of some of the costumes that are going to be used. Judging by the looks of these things, this is going to be really cool. cool. And if the other scare zones are anywhere near as creative as this is, I can't wait for those to start getting announced. We're gonna be getting the return of Death Eaters in the Harry Potter area, and for our shows, it seems that we're gonna get some sort of Universal showcase, as well as the return of The Purge: Dangerous Waters. How are you guys feeling about this latest round of speculation that's going on? Are you excited about the things that have been featured here? How are we feeling about these guesses for these few things that haven't been announced yet? I'm thinking that everything's probably pretty nailed down and spot on as far as these guesses go. I'd be pretty surprised if anything, well, surprises us at this point. But hey, I'm always open to being wrong. Let me know down below what you're most excited for, and let me know what maybe you were hoping for that just isn't panning out this year. A lot of people were really hoping for Five Nights at Freddy's or Nightmare on Elm Street, but it just wasn't in the cards, I guess. It could still happen next year, I don't know. Last year they were supposed to have Evil Dead and that got canned, so maybe one year we'll see them bring everything together that they just couldn't get. A boy can dream, right? And if you're champing at the bit to try to get into the park immediately, I've got good news for you. Multi-night and frequent fear passes should be going up on sale as early as July, so keep that bank account loaded and that eye on the ball. But speaking of dreams and dreams coming true, let's talk about Dark Universe. Universal's Epic Universe is set to open in 2025, and with the opening of the preview center in Orlando, it only comes naturally that they've began unveiling the lands that we'll see. And the second one to be announced was none other than Universal's Epic Dark Universe. Going to the Universal theme parks is always such a magical experience, and the lands that they have and the way that they do the theming there are just mind-blowing, man. The Harry Potter worlds that they've put in recently and what they've been doing with these Nintendo lands just looks absolutely crazy for real. And anytime I've walked through Harry Potter land, I've always wondered like what it would be like to have a land like that tailored to something of my special interests. And it seems the Universal was reading my mind, because the Epic Dark Universe sounds just that epic. It's gonna be crazy. I absolutely can't wait. The Dark Universe land is being known as Darkmoor, and it's seated in time based on Universal's more modernized take of these monsters. The area of the park will feature a beautiful gothic landscape littered with blood, skeletons, and graves. It's got this awesome fountain in the front that's got this beautiful red glow and features 2 rides, 2 dining areas, and a little parlor where you can get your face painted to make you look like a monster. The main attraction of this land is Monsters Unchained, the Frankenstein experiment. This ride follows Dr. Victoria Frankenstein, Victor Frankenstein's great-granddaughter, as she attempts to clear the Frankenstein name by trapping all of the Universal monsters within her laboratory, where she there performs experiments on them. To her surprise, however, Dracula has found a way to free the monsters, and you'll ride your way through the laboratory on a Harry Potter Forbidden Journey type ride system, encountering all kinds of horrific creatures. Universal Parks has said that this will be the scariest ride that they've developed to date, and given the intensity of the Mummy ride, I think that this might be really cool. This ride incorporates every bit of technology that we've seen to the parks so far, and takes it the step even further, and they've invented some new tricks for this guy. But if a state-of-the-art dark ride doesn't tickle your fancy, then maybe a roller coaster where the ride vehicles are built on a rotating base will. That's right, the Curse of the Werewolf will be a medium-intensity roller coaster based on the 1941 film The Wolfman. The track takes you through a guild of mystics campsite that is rich with beauty, violence, and of course werewolves. This ride will showcase the entire land of Darkmoor, and you'll even come face to face with an awesome animatronic werewolf. I cannot wait to see this in person, man. I hope it's gruesome. This land will also feature meet and greets from all of your favorite Universal Monsters characters, so you can get that picture with the Frankenstein that you've always wanted. And getting back to those restaurants that we mentioned earlier, the theming in these guys is so rich and beautiful. Das Steakhouse is a steakhouse that's ran by the servants of vampires. This creepy gothic dining hall serves as the perfect place for you to fatten yourself up, and for vampires to pick out their next meal as well. So if you're keen on the vampires' tricks and you want to avoid that, you can carry on over to the Burning Blade Tavern, what is sure to be a staple in Darkmoor. This tavern is seated inside of the windmill from the end of the original Frankenstein movie, still ablaze, presumably with Frankenstein burning inside. The mill that stands atop this restaurant erupts into flames every 20 minutes, kinda like the dragon on the top of Gringotts. So if you prefer your bratwurst extra crispy, this won't be an issue. Darkmoor looks to be ripped straight out of a dream, and I can't wait to see how they expand this land in the future. This is sure to be a fan favorite here. So that wraps us up with all the cool horror news of things that's coming to Universal here soon. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to send it to a friend that you think might enjoy it too. And before you click out, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe on this guy right here. What are you most excited for coming to Universal Orlando or Hollywood this year for Halloween Horror Nights? And what do you think of the reveal of the epic dark universe. Do you like the modernized approach on these monsters, or do you prefer the classic stuff? Are you excited for the rides, and which one, if so, are you more excited for? Are you a roller coaster type of person, or are you excited to see what kind of state-of-the-art technology they invented for this dark ride? How are we feeling about the steakhouse and the burning tavern? What kind of monster are you gonna get your face painted like at the boutique? And whether your day's been going good or bad today, I hope it gets better.